Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rebuild podcast. You have your host here, me, Beth Borody, and Carmen Turner, and we are looking forward to chatting with you all again this week and sharing a little bit around the topic of values and how you define your values, how your values work for both life and business, and what happens when you're out of line with your values or possibly haven't defined your values. How do you get there? So I'm excited to be here with you today, Carmen, because I know you have a lot of experience in this area and a lot of insights to share. So let's dive into it.
Yeah, I love this. This has been coming up with a lot of women I've been speaking with and clients. And I've gone through this journey as well, too, to really think about and define my values, both in career and personal. And it's been a great tool to help you navigate difficult decisions and help you understand why sometimes things don't like quite sit right. And it's like, that's not right. It doesn't feel right. And so listening to that and when you have those values defined, it can be super useful.
I actually have one of those boards with like the push pin letters that you can put in. I have one of those actually right next to me that has my values on it. And I had done that exercise a couple years ago, really wanting to hone in on what is important to me and where do I not compromise? And I think that's a lot with values is those non-negotiables on when decisions are being made. And the top two on mine, whenever I've kind of written out values or I have them or I speak about them, the top two I always have are honesty and integrity, and how I show up with those values in all aspects of my life, whether that be with my family, with my friends, my career, my team. And I think you're very right. It really is what I lean on when those uncomfortable or tough decisions need to be made, or when you're in those uncomfortable positions, particularly with rebuilds, is like there are lots of things and lots of options that come to us all the time that we can say yes or no to. And it's really leaning on those values for that alignment to not just do something that's safe or that's easy, but to do something that may feel uncomfortable, may feel a bit unknown, but I know to my core it aligns with those values that I have identified and defined for myself.
That's so interesting because when you say honesty and integrity, those are two things that would come to mind when I think of you. So
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
yeah,
great news to
yeah.
hear. Yeah.
No, you always do what you say you're going to do, and you always like show up that way. So I love that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and even values, like I have values for my like my life, because we always talk about building our careers around our life, and that I see that as like the foundation. And so like one of those values is for me is um like having control of my schedule and like having that autonomy, um and also like I valuing like myself. If I take care of myself as the asset and I look at myself as the asset, then everything else rises.
What an interesting way to look at that from almost an environment standpoint. So I would say when I've defined values, they've always been like attributes, or they've been, adjectives to some degree, for what a value is, which has worked for me. But I like that idea of looking at it from an environment and how is your life set up, and what are the things that you care about, and the things you value. That actually make that up for you. I've never heard that before, and that's a very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, because I look at it kind of like as a pyramid where at the base is you and your life values and defining those and like what are they and then how do they play out every day? What does that look like? And then on top of that is the career, the business values. And then it's like kind of like that whole thing is your vision. So it helps because sometimes you have an opportunity that comes up as you were talking about where it sounds great and but it just doesn't like sync with your values. So then it's like, well, why am I kind of not totally excited about this? Or why does this not like feels like I'm not going to be moving in that direction? Well, it's like, well, maybe because in your values that it just doesn't align.
Mhm. And what would you say when you say that you have your life values and then you have your business values? How do you think those differ?
That's a good question because um they are very connected, because obviously like how I run my career, my business is like based on my beliefs and my values and what's important to me. Um, but I think my life values are really about what is important to me, with this concept that like I'm the asset, and how do I take care of the asset? So taking care of myself, and then that looks like my like health goals, like how I that's important to me. I'm always going to schedule that in. um Family time, time for friends, like my own personal like vision and what I want to get out of this life. But then there's also obviously like contributing to a more sustainable world. Like that's important to me for my kids, because my kids are a key part of that as well. And then that kind of translates into the business and my purpose related to my career, which is helping to transition the world to a more sustainable society through the power of business. And that's where it then comes in.
It's like valuing yourself. And you've said it now a couple times that you value yourself as the asset, which is a bit opposite to how most of us operate, where we kind of see ourselves as the vessel to get things done. And we are the vessel to just produce work and produce for others and produce
Mhm.
for our family and friends. Uh, but taking that flip side of, no, I value myself as the asset and I am important and how I'm showing up is important and my health is important. Because without doing that, I can't be a vessel for anything because I'll be
Yeah.
depleted. I won't have energy. I'll be sick. And again, that just is something that I haven't thought about that framing before, which is a really cool way to look at values. And again, goes back to that piece of loving yourself, having that confidence and trust in yourself, and then knowing no matter what, wherever you are in your kind of life's journey, whether you're on a high or a low or somewhere in between, you can constantly come back to yourself and constantly come back to that love and value of who you are, to build from and move forward from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like I would have talked about it in a way of like you are the CEO of your life too. And so like CEOs are typically, they have their support teams, like they surround themselves with teams, and because they see that that's when they're operating at that level, when they feel supported, they're not running around doing everything.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same concept, like seeing yourself truly as the CEO, not like the one constantly pouring of yourself
Yeah.
to giving yourself away. That doesn't work at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it reminds me, I was just sharing with you a conversation I had recently, with a woman who, switched career paths. She was on kind of one trajectory and she realized, I don't think that this is what I want to be doing. And she said, I don't want my boss's job. I don't want my boss's job. So what am I doing on this path? And so she went back, she got another degree. She kind of totally switched gears and went into another sector and had these big goals to kind of be the top of the firm and in the firm and kind of with the boys and all this stuff and kind of make her mark. And she worked so hard to get there and she got there and she had this moment of like, oh, this isn't really what I thought it would be. This isn't fulfilling what I thought it would fill. I worked so very hard for this. Is something wrong with me? Did I not do something? And landing in this role that by, external perception was well-paying, senior position, influential, kind of checks all of the boxes of what success looks like. And people being really impressed by the ability to make it to those levels. And here she was sitting there thinking, this isn't doing it for me, and this isn't what I want.
Mm.
And coupled with that, I had another conversation with another woman this week who kept using the term backwards, where she said, if I want to be fulfilled, I have to go backwards in my career, because I really loved the role I was doing kind of 3 roles ago, but I've progressed since then, but I'm not as happy. And I want to go back to that role, but it means that I now have to go backwards in my career. And I challenged that, and I said, it's not backwards if it's actually fulfilling your vision and purpose for yourself. And that's very much just a societal thing that we put on, that there's only progress forward and that's it. But I think all of that really ties into what we're talking about, is you get to these different spots of what you thought we're supposed to be, where we thought we think we are supposed to go, and all of a sudden they're not doing it for us.
Yeah. And those, like, the roles that didn't turn out for her, that's just all data. It's like, okay, this is information telling me what I like and what I don't like. As I start to, like, when we grow and age and progress, like, it's just we become more of the people who we want to become, we become more of the person we want to become. And you can only do that by trying new things and seeing, like, oh no, that's not working. And the more you are connected and you have a set of defined values, it's going to happen a lot faster.
They're almost like checkpoints for you. They're like
Yeah,
your check
exactly.
engine lights of like, wait a second, something's not fitting here. But it's the temptation of just doing what's easy and doing what's expected, because it is possibly easier to continue going towards that progress than facing the criticism or talk or whatever it may be of being perceived as going backwards. And maybe that's more ego that gets
Yeah,
hidden, but it's that, again, why would you want to do something you've already done if you have the opportunity to be bigger and better, so to
yeah,
speak? But I think, again, exactly what you said, it's where those values then come in of, right, but what's actually fueling me? And
yeah,
what do I want for my life? How do I stop serving everyone around me and the expectation of what others have for my life? And how do I really hone into what I care about and
yeah.
focus on that above all else?
So this is where I think it's been really helpful for me when to have a coach and somebody who sees another, who knows me, who is like, it's not just about being a cheerleader, but someone who believes in you more than you believe in yourself, but who can help you see things in a different perspective. Because, like, I remember being offered this role, and on paper it was everything that I wanted.
Mm.
Um, and it was a huge opportunity. But at the end of the day, it didn't align with my life values, and it wasn't the right thing for myself and the family. And so I turned it down, and it was such a hard decision, but I know it was the right one, and I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I had a coach at the time who could kind of talk me through, because I could have seen myself being like, well, I need to take it. I should take it. I like, that's the right thing to do. Like, society tells you it's the right thing to do. Like, go where the job is, go where the offer is, go for that opportunity because it's like a really, big pay increase or, high profile. But no, like, it was absolutely not the right move for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that so much. And I think, again, it's the idea of like, you're so lucky that this offer came to you. Why would you turn it down? And it's like, I'm not
Mm,
lucky. I'm actually qualified for that offer. And I had every right to kind of pursue it through until the end to see if it was something that worked for me. And it didn't. And so you turn it down and you keep going. But it's just this, I think, particularly also in mining, there's just such this expectation, because there's so much talk around DEI, there's so much talk about involving women in more positions and in more leadership positions, that when women don't take these roles, it's like, well, we tried to give it to them and they're not taking it, as opposed to seeing, right, why didn't they take it? It's because these roles still are not fit for women. They still are not adaptive to what women's needs are and for different value sets or ways of working. And so, of course, we see women taking on these leadership roles and sacrificing everything, sacrificing their family time, their health, themselves, their mental capacity, all of that, and burning out within 3 to 5 years, and then leaving the industry anyways, or taking breaks from the industry. Or we see companies who are trying to do things a bit more progressively to try and support women and understand that women are coming to the table with different sets of needs. That's just the reality. And it's not that women are lesser than, it's just that we are different and we need different accommodations for what we're doing. And so those roles, when they are offered, again, we need to make sure that they align with us and that the companies understand that by aligning with your core value, aligning with the expectations that you have, and prioritizing family, prioritizing health, that you are only going to show up better in that role and show up better for whatever the team is, whatever the objectives are within that role, ultimately bettering the company. But there's still such a disconnect and between this type of work and leadership and just like grinding it out 24/7, no matter what, being on call 24/7, that still is praised and idolized, and like that busyness. If you don't have that full busyness, then you're not important. Which again, you look at those people and they don't look happy. They don't look like
No.
they're having a great time. They don't look
No.
like they're aligned with their purpose and their vision.
Mhm.
And I doubt that they're going to be staying in those roles for very long because it is just not sustainable at this time.
Yeah, and I think the question is like, why did you take that role if you knew that it wasn't quite like aligned with what you wanted? Where does that come from? Because you created that opportunity.
Mhm.
So more opportunities will come because you create that. So it's the lack of belief that you created that and that something else will come along. Because if I had taken that role, you and I never would have met,
Mm-hmm.
and we never would have, worked together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And it's like recognizing that question of, so why are you taking this role if you know that it doesn't feel totally right? But there's that piece of, well, I'm willing to sacrifice a bit now because it will better my family. It's better income. It's better this. It's better that. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I think for sure when I was holding the VP role with New Gold, that there was certainly a lot of that for me, where it was like, this is going to set my family up. This is going to set me up in the industry. There's a lot of benefit, but it's a very slippery slope because you then kind of become a cog in the wheel of someone else's values. And those values are profit driven at all costs, as
Mhm.
opposed to being able to set your own boundaries up again, because we haven't actually had an environment that allows for those boundaries to be set. And so I
Mhm.
think there is this, like, your values can ebb and flow, and there's nothing wrong with being motivated by money. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be motivated by holding senior titles. I think you can get a lot of fulfillment out of that if they do align with you, but it is making sure that you are not sacrificing so much, or not chipping away at those sacrifices little by little, that all of a sudden you look in the mirror and you're exhausted. And you don't have that identity anymore because you let it all kind of slide away. And so it's that rigor. And I think we've chatted about this before. It takes work. Like it's like practicing a muscle, right? And building
Yeah.
that muscle up to be able to say no, to be able to have those boundaries. Um, and there's a woman, she's one of the Femina members, and I admire her so much. And I had the opportunity to work with her previously. And she is so good at setting her boundaries around her family, and especially the time with her kids. And if I was to guess what her values were, family and her children would be number one above everything. And I
Mhm.
remember when I worked with her, I would always kind of think, wow, that's really interesting that she does that. I don't think I would take that same approach because I was nervous that if I did, I wouldn't progress the way that I was progressing. And in hindsight now, I see how she's progressed in her career. I see where she's gone, and she sticks so solidly to those boundaries, that I know. I've talked to other women who know her too, and we all say that is amazing. She is so grounded in her value of family and so grounded in her value of family, or of her kids and being with her kids, that she has been able to build her career around that value and build her
Mhm.
career around where her priorities are. And she's thriving. She's thriving in her job. She's like, she has a lot that she's built for herself. And I admire that so much. And I think I've learned to do that more and more over this last year and a half. Um, and I think being away from that corporate job was a necessity for me to be able to learn this. I don't think I would have learned it continuing my VP role, because I would have just been, again, continuing in that grind and in that rat race. But having this time away and really growing Femina and really working with Irma and doing things that really align with me and building things that align with me, it shows me how hard it would be to go back to something else.
Mhm.
I love this far too much to give it up at this point.
Well, that's some tells you something, but I think that's just what a great role model. I don't know if that's the right word, but what a great example of something. It could be different, right? It could be you can have that corporate job, and I think it takes the right company with that really lives its own values, and you knowing your values, like this woman you were talking about, and like that's just such a great example for how it can be different. It's not always, I heard someone say, I don't really believe in balance. It's priorities, like prioritizing. It's a constant prioritization. Like this week, I'm working, I am, we have these deadlines or whatever, and this is like, we're going to get this done. And then when I'm at home, it's like my focus is on that.
Yeah. And I'm the opposite this week. This week, I have purposely minimized my schedule, minimized what I was doing because I know I have two back-to-back travel weeks. And I haven't had two back-to-back travel weeks in over a year at this point. And
Yeah.
so I know
Yeah.
it's going to be busy. I know that I'm going to have to be on, and I know that there's less control over my schedule over the next 2 weeks. And so this week I've just very intentionally made sure that I did all of the school pickups. I did all the school drop-offs. I've taken time in the afternoons just to like rest, relax, catch up with friends, do those types of things. Because I could, and I knew that that wasn't going to be an option over the next little while. So, uh, and it was interesting making those decisions. I did feel guilty. There was guilt that was attached to that of like, oh my gosh, there's so much I could be doing. And so I should be doing it.
Mhm.
But then again, it was that mental kind of questioning of who am I doing that for? Am I doing it for me, or am I doing it for kind of perception of someone else or to prove something? And if it's the latter, well, then I really don't need to be doing it. And I can kind of recheck myself. But it has been building that values muscle and building that what is important to me and how do I show up consistently with those leading the way.
That's such a good checkpoint. Like, what am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? Is it for me or for someone else?
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I struggled with that a lot, when my kids were really young, of like having to do it all perfectly, like have the career, be like the perfect mom, making sure they got their green smoothies,
Yeah. Yeah.
homemade food and all that. And it's like, yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. I get that all the time right now with having a baby.
Mhm.
People are like, how are you doing it? How do you have a baby at home? And how are you growing Femina? And how do you work with Irma? And like, how are you doing all of this stuff like externally? And the reality is I can do it because I have full control over when and how I do it.
Mhm.
And I'm not doing it for anyone else. And the fact of the matter is, it is far less stressful for me to have a baby and grow a business at the same time than it was to need to be on 24/7 for a corporate job that I didn't have control over. And I
Mhm.
didn't have a say on where and how my time was used because my time was the company's and that was it. So I
Yeah.
would much rather have a baby and grow a business and still have a full-time job that honors the fact that I'm growing a business and have a family and honors what those roles all are, than be trying to do what I was doing before.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take away from everything I got from that role. I loved the work that I was able to do at New Gold. I loved what we created together. I
Mhm.
got so much from it for so long, but when it started to not be good, uh, it was really not good and it was exhausting. And seeing that now on the other side of just how much better life can be while having more influence in the industry and having more of an impact than I ever could have had there. Uh,
Mhm.
is like refreshing. But I don't know, I wonder, people listening to this, and if they're in that kind of stuck grind, will they see the other, like, will they see the light at the end of the tunnel? Or are they so kind of caught up in like, well, no, I'm making so much money and have such an important title, and why would I ever want to give that up if they see anything that on the other side?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever check in on your values, and like this could be from the feminine perspective too, like checking in on like these are our values. Do they still resonate? Is there anything else that we need to?
Yeah. I mean, I used to be a really big January 1st goal setter, like new year, new objectives, new goals. Um, Last year, I read a book called The Wintering, which was all about don't set your like don't feel the need to be productive in the middle of winter. Like that's not natural for us. It's not natural for our bodies and the way
Right.
that things work. And so I really take a lens kind of coming into spring. And I've even found it this year coming into September, those times of the year where there's a lot of kind of new energy, or it's kind of like this rebirth is happening throughout the year, whether it be springtime or back to school or whatever, that I generally now take a pause at that time. And I look at my values and I say, do these still align? Is this still what matters to me? Or I'll do the exercise and be like, write down the 5 things, like your 5 top values, and I'll see if they match what I wrote down 6 months ago, or if there's anything new or things like that. And for the most part, they're generally the same. When it comes to Femina, that's a really interesting question, because Femina essentially was built to mirror my personal values, because it was built from me and built on what I cared about. But as we grow and as our culture shifts, those values very much may change as well. I think there'll always kind of be some core pieces connected to me, because I am still so much of the brand and so much of the company. But as other people take on leadership roles and as Femina grows, I do think that we will need to do a reassessment of, are our values enough? Does it encompass everything that people are looking for? And do we need to change them up every once in a while?
Mm.
But that's an
Yeah.
exciting place for me to be. I would like, that's an exercise that I would love to do, and love to put that out to members to say, you tell me what the value is of Femina for you. Like, and let's see if there's like similarities or trends on what members are speaking about, because members have a completely different experience to Femina than I do as the founder. And that will always be the case. And so it needs to reflect what they are getting from the company. More and less about what I am kind of putting into it, and that reflection of just me.
Yeah. And I think it's something that's interesting to use as a tool, like in quarterly planning too, like coming back to the values at the start of the planning, like, oh yeah, this is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Like, is still true.
Yeah.
It's like that check-in, and that builds that kind of grounding, I think.
Mhm. And again, having them just acts as that guidepost, and it acts as the ability to so you prepared for this. You prepared to make these decisions because you said, these are my non-negotiables, and whatever decision I'm coming to, or whatever fork in the road I have, I've already done the work to identify what's important to me. And so when you get to those decisions, and you could have opportunities that, like, there's no wrong answer. There's just great opportunities in front of you. And you have to kind of just pick a path. And it's not that one is wrong and one is right. It's just that you then get to fall back on the prep work that you already did by identifying those values and say, what feels the best right now? And that can change, and your opinions can change, and your values can change, but it's allowing you to be proactive about your life and be intentional about the direction you're building your life, and where you want to go, as opposed to panicking when those decisions come up and being like, I don't know, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? It's like, you already know what you're supposed to do. You already did this. You already put that work in place. And so lean on that and trust yourself.
Yeah, I think what's just as important as your vision and knowing what you want is your values. Are your values, is so that you can, as you said, the goal is creating multiple opportunities so that there are lots of different pathways that you can choose, and you don't feel like you're stuck with one decision or two. Then that's a dilemma, but that you actually have multiple pathways forward.
Yeah.
And then it's based on the foundation of your values.
Yeah. Yeah. They're key. I mean, it's why we wanted to chat about it today, because I think we've both done both. We've both lived lives when we have not had those defined values, and have seen where they have taken us, and not that those places are bad, but we're not fully aligned. And then I think we can both confidently say that we have also lived paths where we have our values defined and we try and live towards those, and just the peace that comes with that and the joy that comes with that. Doesn't mean everything's easy, doesn't mean everything's like a walk in the park, but it means that we are more confident in the decisions that we can make because we have those values behind us.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I've got. Anything else you want to add, or I think
No,
that's a
I
good
think that was great. It makes me want to go back and review my values right now and do a little bit of exercise. So maybe I'll do that this afternoon. But I always love these chats with you, and I hope you as listeners enjoyed this episode.
Great. We'll have a great weekend.
Thanks, Carmen.